WWE wrestlers whose bodies changed forever after wrestling. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos. Number 10. Kevin Nash, his knee. A former WWE champion, Kevin Nash was plagued with injuries throughout his career. It always seemed like injuries held Nash back, and in 2020, Nash took to X to discuss his formal retirement from pro wrestling, and he shared a picture of his leg, which made for uncomfortable viewing. The reason I retired was I was deformed and basically crippled. This knee replacement and 2 years of rehab and training has been brutal. Just to get my hips to realign was incredibly painful. To the haters, F off. To those who have championed my recovery, I send my thanks and love. The impact of pro wrestling has on wrestlers can never be denied. Whilst Nash was on a larger size in terms of pro wrestlers, he never took any unnecessary risks as a performer. Yet even still, this is the condition that his body is in thanks to years of taking bumps. Number 9. Mick Foley, his ear. Mick Foley was always prone to putting his life on the line in the ring. Foley took some of the most sinister and grueling bumps in pro wrestling history, but it was a match with the legendary Vader that resulted in a portion of the Hall of Famer's ear to come off. In 1994, Foley and Vader were wrestling in Germany, and a spot saw Foley get stuck in the ropes. Unfortunately, the ropes were too tight, and this resulted in a section of his ear tearing right off. Moments later, Foley and Vader were exchanging brutal strikes, and this is when Vader made contact with the damaged ear, and this resulted in a section of his ear tearing. The referee for the match would infamously pick Foley's ear up and put it in his pocket, and the match continued as if nothing ever happened. Foley would undergo a heinous 4-hour operation, during which all the cartilage from his missing ear was removed. The cartilage was then placed in a man-made pocket an inch above what was left of his ear. Number 8. Shawn Michaels, his eye. If you started watching pro wrestling during the final stages of Shawn Michaels' WWE run, you'd be made under the impression that HBK always had a lazy eye. In reality, HBK suffered the lazy eye in a match, and the damage was so severe that it still impacts him to this very day. His lazy eye surfaced back in 2004 during a match with Kane at the Unforgiven pay-per-view. In the match, HBK took a bump following a traditional big boot, and when he landed, he instantly knew that something was seriously wrong. The muscle which attached his eye was damaged, and this resulted in his eye looking out of place. The eye injury got worse as HBK continued to wrestle over the years, and WWE decided to include it in a storyline in 2008. During Mr. WrestleMania's acclaimed feud with Chris Jericho, WWE would claim that the dastardly Jericho had caused HBK's injury, when in fact it was a freak accident that took place 4 years prior. Number 7. Kofi Kingston, sunken chest. Even though Kofi Kingston continues to wrestle on WWE TV, he's been working with a sunken chest for years on end. Whilst not the worst thing in the world, it is apparent just by looking at the talented star that his chest has been damaged. It's hardly a surprise that this damage has come from the crazy world of pro wrestling, and Kingston discussed this on the New Day's podcast, exactly how his chest ended up the way it is. You were talking about the reason for people getting hard chops, and it's based on kind of like their attitude. And I wish that you would have told me that back in 2009, because I came out and I debuted in 2008, and you'll remember I had a nice full chest. My chest was popping, do you know what I mean? I go to do a push-up and my chest hits the ground. You know what I mean? I had a real life chest. And then Shawn and I ended up having a match, and I got chopped so hard in the chest, and my chest has never been the same since. Kingston doesn't appear to hold any bad blood towards Big Show, and it seems like a case of Kingston's chest not reacting well to the intensity of Big Show's chops. Number 6. Paul Orndorff, his arm. In the mid-80s, Paul Orndorff was one of WWE's biggest stars, and he would even main event the inaugural Wrestlemania. During the height of his popularity, Orndorff suffered a life-changing injury to his spine, and this injury led to the diminished use of his right arm. Due to this being a different time in pro wrestling, Mr. Wonderful pushed through the injury, mainly to continue his top program with Hulk Hogan. Orndorff's arm would appear smaller over time, and due to how impressive Orndorff's physique was, it was hard to ignore. Number 5. Scott Steiner, indented chest. Scott Steiner is another top name that has struggled with all sorts of injuries and medical problems over his life and career. Steiner was suffering from drop foot when he returned to WWE in 2002. Whilst this was hard to notice when looking at Steiner, it was apparent that Steiner was struggling with one of his feet whenever he wrestled. Another issue Steiner had during his career was an indented chest, similar to that suffered by Kofi Kingston. In June of 2007, Scott Steiner was wrestling for TNA at a live event, and during the match, Steiner was kicked in the throat. Once he got backstage, Steiner started to cough up blood, and after a hospital visit, he was diagnosed with a torn trachea and was told he only had a few hours to live. Due to the nature of Steiner's medical situation, he was placed in an induced coma and rushed into surgery. The doctors were forced to cut into his pectoral muscles in order to repair his trachea. The amazing doctors were able to save Steiner's life, and he was able to continue wrestling for many more years. While Steiner looked noticeably different, this was a small sacrifice to make in order to save his life. Number 5. Edge broken neck. When Edge returned to WWE in 2004, he looked completely different. Edge had just recovered from a broken neck and he decided to drastically alter his body. Edge was a different animal and he put a ton of mass, and there was a number of reasons for this. Due to the neck injury, Edge had to alter his style. Any high-risk moves were moved out of his moveset, and it was probably Edge's logic that if he put on muscle, it would accommodate for the lack of high-flying moves. Edge's body and physique would consistently change over the coming years, and he would never ultimately look the same way he did before his neck injury. Number 3. Stone Cold Steve Austin, his knees. One of the most signature aspects of Stone Cold's look were his knee braces. Even though they served a medical purpose, they added to Austin's aura, and it's bizarre watching old matches from his days without them. Austin tore his ACL on his left knee back in his college days, and when he began to wrestle, he tore his ACL and PCL of the right one. As you can imagine, Austin went through hell to try and get his knees back to how they should be, but he eventually found it easier to wrestle with 1 or 2 knee braces to keep his knees aligned and to avoid serious injury. When Austin came out of retirement for one final match at WrestleMania 38, Austin once again required the assistance of 2 knee braces. Austin hadn't wrestled since 2003 at this point, so Austin's knees had done little healing in that time period, and this is likely an issue that Austin's gonna have to battle for the rest of his life. Number 2. Big Show, his knees. Big Show has been a common fixture in pro wrestling for almost 30 years, and when Big Show made his recent appearances on AEW television, it was obvious that the years of bumps have taken a toll on the former world champion. One of the Big Show's knees looked noticeably different, and according to the man himself, during an interview in Metro UK, he was forced to use a wheelchair for 11 weeks before undergoing knee replacement surgery. Well, I spent 11 weeks in a wheelchair because I was waiting for them to build the implant for my knee because of my size. I had crushed all the bone in the knee. I was bleeding into my skin. So I've got a good pain tolerance, but when I say I rode the tire down to the rim, that's exactly what I did. But luckily, I still have all my ligaments in that knee. Everything's good there. It's a nice brand new titanium joint, so it's good for 35 years. And number 1, Hulk Hogan, his back. Hulk Hogan's problems with his back are well documented, and the legendary wrestler has had a total of 11 surgeries on that body part. Years of surgeries have even led to the Hulk shrinking in size. Speaking on this past weekend podcast, Hogan discussed his health, and it made for a harrowing listen. I think internally I'm healthy, it's just I've used my body so bad. The last 10 or 12 years, I've had 25 surgeries. It's kind of weird because I went to do the Rocky 3 when my mother was still alive. If she would come to my house, she'd go, "Yo T, come over here. The first thing I want to do is measure you." That's what she said to me before I went to do the Rocky movie. I was 335 pounds. I was 6'7" on the nose. Right before my mother died a few years back, she wanted to measure me. I was 6'4.5". Hogan likes to claim that using the leg drop as his finishing move was a contributing factor to his body breaking down. He has said in numerous interviews that dropping the leg night after night led to his back problems, and Hogan went as far as saying he wishes that he picked a move such as a sleeper hold, as it would have caused less long-term damage to his body. But there you have it, folks. WWE wrestlers whose bodies change forever after wrestling. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.